As good as open world games can be, and as popular as they are, the idea of exploring a massive world over the course of 60 hours with millions of objective markers and side activities to pull you in every direction can often be intimidating, or exhausting, or both, especially in an industry that seems so obsessed with making its worlds ridiculously larger and its games even longer. The value of a game that's long but not too long and big but not too big cannot be overstated, which is why semi-open world games are such a gift. They give you the freedom to explore large areas and plenty of side activities to keep you distracted, but they also don't go overboard with that stuff and ensure that they do things on a much smaller scale and often within a linear framework. Here, we'll be talking about 15 such games. Deus Ex: Mankind Divided. Deus Ex: Mankind Divided has some pretty noticeable flaws, but the parts of the game that are good are very good, such as its open world areas. Not only do they strike the perfect balance between large and restrained, they're also diverse and absolutely teeming with atmosphere. Every NPC you meet has a place in this world, while the side quests are some of the best that we've ever played in this generation. Add to that the freedom it gives players in navigating and interacting with its environments, and each area becomes an absolute joy to explore. Uncharted: The Lost Legacy. Introducing open-world elements to a series like Uncharted, the poster boy of hyperlinear games, was a bold move by Naughty Dog, but The Lost Legacy proves that it is something that absolutely can be done, and done very well. A big chunk of the game takes place in completely open-ended environments, and it's an absolute blast. Yakuza 5. Honestly, we could have easily populated half of this list with Yakuza games. Sega's action-adventure franchise has time and again proven that smaller, densely packed worlds can be as engaging as massive maps, if not more so. With 5 different locations to explore, Yakuza 5 is by no means small, but what makes it stand out so much is how diverse and lived-in each location feels. Full of side activities, fun minigames, and memorable characters, Yakuza 5 is a world that we can happily spend countless hours in and never get bored. Nier Automata. If ever you're looking to play an RPG with an interesting world to explore that keeps surprising you with imaginative and beautiful new locations, look no further than Nier Automata. From villages to deserts and so much more, Nier Automata takes pride in how diverse and beautiful its world constantly feels. Each of these areas also manages to be exactly as large as it should be, large enough to facilitate that engrossing exploration that every RPG should have, but not so large that it ends up feeling excessive. God of War. Until not too long ago, anything other than a completely linear approach seemed antithetical to what God of War was all about. But as it did in so many other ways, God of War 2018 did the unimaginable, and it did it really well. With the excellent Lake of Nine serving as its hub, God of War lets players loose in a surprisingly large world with a great many things to see and do. From freeing dragons to taking on side quests to looking for better gear, God of War's respectably large world was filled with a number of side activities that felt like they were in the game for an actual reason, and not just shoehorned in to artificially pad out the game's runtime. Super Mario Odyssey. Fans have been begging Nintendo to make a more open-ended Super Mario game in the vein of Super Mario 64 for years, but not in our wildest dreams could we have imagined a game as ambitious as Super Mario Odyssey. It's a game that lives up to its name. Mario visits so many different places throughout the course of its game, and each is a sandbox begging to be explored and interacted with. No matter what seemingly innocuous corner of the world you go to, you are invariably rewarded for your curiosity, making exploration the whole point of the game. Dishonored 2. Dishonored 2 is a game that follows a linear structure, so it might not be a semi-open world experience in the most literal sense, but given how large many of its maps are and how much freedom you have in terms of how you can interact with them, we couldn't help but include it in this list. That aforementioned freedom is, of course, Dishonored's greatest strength, and it's what makes the game's stealth so compelling, but it also makes exploring its world a ton of fun. Exploration is also often rewarded with really cool secrets or activities, which means it doesn't feel like a waste of time either, which honestly isn't something that even many open-world games can accomplish. Hitman 2. Even if you were to completely ignore your primary objectives in any mission in Hitman 2, chances are you could still spend a surprising amount of time in the game's many sandboxes and still have a blast. The sheer breadth of systems at play in all of Hitman 2's levels is staggering, and messing about with those systems and watching them react is always extremely rewarding in and of itself. A lot of games claim to be sandboxes, but compared to Hitman 2, it's hard to think of many that actually do justice to that word. Borderlands 3. Borderlands has always been a fine example of a series that lets players explore large environments without going overboard, with massive maps littered with side activities. And with multiple large areas to explore, each offering up new things to do and see, Borderlands 3 is perhaps the best realization of that formula. Each area feels suitably different from the last, while each of them also houses plenty of side activities to take on. In being larger than its predecessors, but still not large enough that it feels like a massive open world, it also manages to find just the right size for its maps. Bloodborne. Bloodborne is one of those games that shows you that you don't need to have a fully open map to have a compelling, believable, and engaging world. And it is a world. The city of Yharnam and its surrounding locales are haunting, desolate, bleak, and populated by unspeakable terrors. And yet, the central mystery of it all, coupled with the fact that the game lets you tackle its areas non-linearly, all contribute to the setting of the game feeling bigger than the player's involvement in it, a veritable world unto itself. Dark Souls 3 is an exemplary title when it comes to actually placing the player within a tangible world without sacrificing the tightness of its design. In this case, this is a world of ruin, decrepit and dying, like the last embers of a dying fire. And within this context of a world on the brink of an inevitable end, From Software crafts perhaps their best world yet, with a wild geography and long history to it, all lending to your footsteps across its dying milieu feel that much more significant. Monster Hunter World. Monster Hunter is a series that would lose a lot from going open world, so there were naturally fears when Monster Hunter World was first announced that the series would be sacrificing its strengths to chase a fad unsuited to it. Those fears were unfounded, because instead of giving us one open world, they gave us many. The reason Monster Hunter World works is because Capcom crafted multiple giant areas, made even more compelling thanks to their insane variety, each entirely different from the last, each allowing a totally new ecosystem to exist within it, creating the stage for some of the most epic fights in some of the most breathtaking locales in series history. Metro Exodus. After building its identity around being set in tight, linear, claustrophobic corridors over the course of 2 games, 4A Games' FPS series decided to take the semi-open world approach with Metro Exodus, and many were understandably skeptical about the prospect. But being more open-ended by no means proved to be a knock against Metro Exodus. If anything, the game was made stronger for it. On top of still delivering plenty of classic scares in cramped locations, Metro Exodus also allowed players to freely explore vast environments, and each was an excellent example of top-notch world design, and how to let players explore environments in a game without having to fill up the screen with intrusive and gamified elements constantly telling them where to go. Gears 5. After Gears of War 4, it had become clear that this was a franchise that needed to expand its horizons, which is quite literally what it did with Gears 5. You wouldn't think that a series like Gears would be very well suited to open-world gameplay, but the open-world areas in Gears 5 worked surprisingly well. They could have been better, sure, maybe feel a bit less empty, but thanks to enjoyable traversal and the fact that you are always meaningfully rewarded for going off the beaten path and taking on its side activities, the game's open world aspects ended up being a lot better than many had assumed they would be. The Evil Within 2. When Bethesda first confirmed that The Evil Within 2 would be dipping its toes in open-world waters, many of us immediately assumed that this was yet another game that had fallen prey to the every AAA game must be open-world trap, not least because that design philosophy doesn't gel with the idea of a horror game very well. It's fair to say that the final product proved many of its doubters wrong. The town of Union was a joy to explore, most importantly because none of its side activities felt like meaningless padding, either because of excellent rewards or because of some standout horror moments, and often because a combination of both. The open-world elements of The Evil Within 2 were, surprisingly enough, some of the game's best parts. And that about does it for this video. If you enjoyed what you watched and want to see more from Gaming Bolt, you can always hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell icon next to it. That way you will never miss any of our videos.